This year, Mennonite Church BC is celebrating 75 years of existence, and its reason for existence, in some senses, is because Mennonites were invited to come to BC because there was new land available to them. Where did this new land come from? It was because the Sumas Lake was drained, and there were a lot of First Nations people who fished on that lake and lost their viability as people who had a life going because of the water and because of the lake being there. And so to recognize our 75 years here in BC without recognizing that we've been 75 years on land that was reclaimed from people who had a different livelihood on that land I think is something that's worth giving attention to. And so our commitment to building relationships with the Indigenous peoples here in BC is something we've made a commitment to, and I think a lot of people don't maybe see the value of that commitment, but I think there's something foundational about it that may say something differently as to how we relate to our Indigenous neighbors, even though we don't always see them next door or nearby. These are peoples who have been on this land for much, much longer than we have. And so I think there is something foundational that is sometimes untangible. It's sometimes difficult to put a finger on how this is going to make us a better people, how this is going to make Mennonites being viewed differently as the church. Sometimes I've heard from Indigenous peoples that as we come alongside of them as equal partners, as brothers and sisters, and ask questions, learn from them as they learn from us, that I've heard it said that they're hearing the gospel for the first time, even though the church has been here for many centuries. Another piece to our future is the idea of being a missional church. We have claimed as Mennonite Church across North America to be missional in our basic identity and our paradigm of who we are for more than 10 years. And as Mennonite Church BC, we have also embraced that. But what I see is that we have really not figured out how to do it. And so just to get some help in being able to develop our capacity as missional churches, as being missional in our neighborhoods, as being able to look carefully at what God is doing in our neighborhoods and align with what God is doing and seeking to know the people in our neighborhoods and to let Jesus be seen through us for them, I think is something that we need to grow in, and we don't have the tools necessarily to be able to do that. And so hopefully, even though we've claimed to be missional all these years, that we will be able to grow and just reflect our neighborhoods better than we have in the past. I know that in many places, especially Vancouver, people have moved out of neighborhoods because various reasons, especially because they've gotten very expensive to live in, and to move out to the Fraser Valley or various other places. And so the neighborhood's changed, and we are existing with congregations, buildings that are in neighborhoods, and still a remaining remnant of people who often travel up to a half an hour or maybe even more, but often anywhere from 20 minutes to half an hour to come to church and don't really live in that neighborhood. And so what does that mean? That's a big question. And sometimes I wonder about the importance of having a building in that it locks us into a neighborhood that may not be a place where we can best do ministry in the future. The other side of that is that we can change, can we? That's the question, I guess, and we're hoping that we can change and be relevant to those people that are currently there. And this is where our multicultural dynamic is starting to rise up to try and reflect and invite the people who are in those neighborhoods in creative, inviting ways that they can see us as being a good neighbor and a welcome neighbor in the future. So that piece is there for a healthy future in places where we currently have existing ministries that have a very changing demographic around these buildings that we have. The other piece is the economic piece, where our next generation of young people are all working very hard and all trying to raise kids and be faithful to Jesus, but at the same time, it's getting more and more expensive to live here. And how does this next generation be generous in their financial giving? And just want to honor that, but at the same time, the ministries that we consider to be important, the buildings that we have, these things that have been well cared for and paid for by a previous generation that's done very well and has lived in times where it hasn't been quite so expensive, have really carried us. But what is the next generation going to look like, and what kind of priorities are they going to have because they love Jesus and maybe are going to look at spending, being generous, being good stewards of what they have, what God has given to them in a very different way than what the previous generation did. And so I think that's something that's still unfolding, and we will see the results of that in the near future as the older generation begins to pass away, and the churches are in the hands of the next generation, and their priorities and also their economic capabilities. And so I look forward to what that's going to be, and I'm convinced it will be somewhat different.